are you focusing on me now instead of the video? Okay. Oh, I can see it. Excellent. Sorry. All right. Okay. So we're going to look at chapter 5, which is looking really at sources of revenue. The one note that I want you to mark for this is on the superintendency test. When we're actually looking at what was covered in this textbook, 5 and 6 were the two primary chapters that were on the superintendency exam. So if you haven't taken it yet, or you're going to, and you want to review the two things that are going to be from this book that are predominantly on there, it's revenue sources and local control. So for the superintendency exam, 5 and 6 were the big chapters that were covered the most. And we looked over that at the Education Finance Conference this year, and they also talked about that in the superintendency meetings that Dr. Curry attended. I attended the principal one, she did the superintendent ones, but this was the textbook, and it was really local control and sources of revenue that Oklahoma was most interested in for their test. So the key concepts, again, these are the things that I would know, these are the things that we're going to talk about in here, and that's what I think is important. So big idea is that the tax base times the tax rate equals the yield. But in Oklahoma, our major tax base in the state comes from property taxes. This is where the money comes from, and the money goes back into the schools. That actually is a good thing. Why is it good that most of our school funding is coming from property taxes in the state? Why is that positive?
Because everyone's invested in education.
Yep, and everybody that lives in the district is invested in the district, and that's very good. That's, I mean, it's, you know, do you want your property taxes to be higher by being in a better district? You know, probably not. You'd like to have tax relief, but the positive is you know that the money is going back into the school system, and it is. And it makes it more transparent as well. So the book says that all citizens owe taxes and all citizens pay taxes. That's what our textbook tries to tell us. So does that happen? Is that the truth? Well, we all know that that's. Except for big companies that get the tax breaks and really poor people. So that's your challenge. So what's fair share? What should people be liable for? How does that work? So in theory, we should have a progressive income tax. The problem is, what should a progressive income tax actually yield? What should be the thresholds for everybody? Should there be a certain amount that gets taxed more? Should we really be taxing 46% on amounts that are $1 million or more? I always use the Survivor example when I'm talking about income taxes. If you go on Survivor and you win the $1 million check, you get a check the next day for $540,000. You pay $460,000 in taxes. For every $1 million that you win, 46% goes to taxes. Is that right? Is that fair? I mean, I think that's too much. But then the question is, what's the right amount?
Everybody gets taxed the same amount. And
that's the idea of a flat rate. I'm all about a flat rate. Everybody in this room should be all about a flat rate. Why? Because in theory you're in leadership positions, or you're going to be, meaning that you should be making more money. Mm-hmm. But how do you balance that? What's the fair amount? So you have to make sure that it's visible. You have to make sure that administrative costs involved in taxing are very low. You have to make sure that it's predictable on what's coming in and where the money's going to go. I think this is a benefit to the state of Oklahoma, because we publicly know where the money is coming from and where the money is going in the state. You might not think that we do, but when you compare comparatively to other states, we actually have more control over this than most of the United States. We do. And there's always going to be some exceptions, but we're very lucky here with what we have. My argument is that there's no such thing as equitable education. It doesn't exist. Giving fair and equitable treatment to every single person isn't real. If somebody's poor, and then they come into money, and they have children, what are they going to do?
Private school.
They're private school, or they're going to move. They're going to do one of two things. So what happens then to the poor district? It stays poor. You can't improve it. So what districts improve?
schools where their tax base increases, you're having a positive inflow of people moving in.
The districts that have space for people to move, suburban districts that are slowly improving, in theory, your districts that are at the 60th and 80th percentile is the dream job for all of you as superintendents. Because if you can make enough improvement where you'll get a massive raise, people will move in, and your property taxes will increase and go up, and your home value will go up. Once you're at the top, if you're at the top district, really not much room to go. When I interviewed for this job, where did they take me? They only took me to one place, and that was what Oklahoma looks like. They drove me around one district. What district did they drive me around?
Jinx.
They drove me around Jinx. They said, this is where you're going to move, and this is where you're going to have children, this is where you're going to be, this is where your future is. You're going to live here, and this is where you're going to send your kids. This is what you're going to pay for your homes. And I looked at it, and I was just banging my head against the wall saying, really, that's how much homes are here. But that's what they did on my interview here. They brought a realtor in, and they said, we're going to take your own Jinx. I said, can I look elsewhere? They said, no, this is where you're going to go. So that was the hiring approach that they used here. But why would they do that? What's the motivation to do it? It's a smart move. Why would you do that?
Because they want you to move to Jinx.
Why do they want me to move to Jinx?
They want you to go, yeah.
Yeah, good schools.
Have
Kind
your
of
kids
an
go there.
all-American.
It's all-American, it's the vision, it's the best homes, it's the best everything. And if I moved there and I bought a home there, in theory, I would stay.
Have kids there, you be.
I'd be the parent that sends my kid there, and yeah. So that's why when people argue that we should have equitable education, if they had equitable education, why didn't they take me to the poor districts and say, why don't you live here? Why didn't they do that on my interview? They took me to Jinx.
Is Jinx in the 68th to 80th percentile, or is it higher?
Oh God, no! It's 99 to 100.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I wouldn't want to be.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to be a superintendent there. Why?
There's no room for.
Lots of input.
Lots of input.
Yeah.
No, if I screw up, there's so much transparency on me. It's bad. It would be horrible. But if I'm in a 60th to 80th percentile district, that'd be awesome because I can improve it. And I can move it up to the top.
So what would be one around here in
I-
60
It's like
to
Broken
80th
Arrow.
percentile?
Yeah, Broken Arrow.
Right there.
That's my Broken Arrow.
So much room to grow out there.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
What if, well, so unions and probably.
Unions landlocked.
We're
There's
starting to
no more-
become landlocked.
Landlocked.
There's less
Yeah.
and less room to grow.
But-
I'd say Claremore is, right?
Being
Yeah.
also
Claremore's about
Claremore.
60, 65.
Claremore probably is.
Yeah. That's where I want to be a superintendent, and I want to position myself to win. That's where I want to be. I don't want to be one of the top places because there's so much room for failure. And financially, there's room for failure as well. So what do? We used to have things called rate bills. We used to have tuition to attend the school. Everybody paid a charge, and this is why we have private schools. Private schools exist because people used to pay to go to school. It's the cost of doing business. That failed miserably. But private schools still exist because this was historically what we used.
How can private schools take federal dollars for special ed students and still say they're private schools?
Because they're technically belonging to a district and a community. They have not redistricted or rezoned. If they redistrict or rezone, then they wouldn't be a part of that community's base. And that's how they can actually take the money. As crazy as this is, if a charter or private school opens up, they're eligible for federal funding because technically that child could leave at any time and move to a different district, or anybody else from that district could move into the private school if they could afford to. You and I all know that they're not going to be able to afford to, but they can still take the federal money to do it. Which is, I have issues with that, but that's, unless they are their own entity in their own like little isolated island, they're entitled to it. And they can do it at the expense of the other school districts too, which causes really the challenge because they're taking the money that would go to the public school that's in the district. So, the governor has power over education, over state bills. This is, most of the time, the governor's not that powerful. They're really not. The Senate and the House of Representatives for the state is where the power is, politically. But in education, that ain't the case. It's the governor's office. But if we were to say, where is the power in each state, it's actually the state Senate and the state House of Representatives. but in education, it's in the governor's office. Is that right? Is that wrong? Depends how you do things. Should we have an elected official as the state superintendent? Yes or no? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is for that. There are big problems with that, could be, that there's probably problems with appointments as well. So save this page for the quiz and midterm. Here are the big ideas. We have a very high tax burden in the state. Do you know why we have a high tax burden? Because we have so many school districts. If we didn't have that many school districts, we would not have a high local tax burden. But in order to keep all of our school districts in our sense of towns and sense of community, we tax so much in the state, and we really do tax a lot in the state. It's the 19th highest, which is crazy. I never would have thought that about Oklahoma coming here. The increase in marginal tax, the big jump, is for individuals or families making more than $80,000. That is your threshold. Once you cross the $80,000 line in Oklahoma, you pay more in taxes. Other states, it's a lot higher. We have a fairly high combined local and state rate for taxes. One of the things that can be a challenge is that the taxable value of your property is not to exceed 35%. So we could actually take more on property taxes than we do in the state. We eliminate that burden by having a higher marginal tax and by having higher income taxes. So that's one of the trade-offs in the state. But I think, it's surprising to me that we have one of the highest tax burdens. But my argument is it's because we have these individual accountability for districts. So we only have a few states without state income tax. There's only 7 states without it. So keep that in mind. So sales tax. We're 4th in the United States on sales tax. 4th. 4th highest sales tax in the United States. We're only behind Tennessee, California, and Washington. Once again, my belief, my guess of this is because it's all this, local control and local individuality in districts. So if you live in Oklahoma, we have a very high sales tax. We also have a very high tobacco and alcohol excise tax as well in the state. My mother is a heavy-duty smoker, and when we drive home back to Pennsylvania, we stop in Missouri, and we buy her packs of cigarettes in Missouri. The same pack of cigarettes that she would smoke that she smokes in Pennsylvania, that's $6.20 a pack, is $5.40 a pack in Oklahoma, and it's $3 in Missouri, because they don't have as high of an excise tax as we do in Oklahoma. Property tax. Big idea that you have to know is that something is considered real property if it's not readily movable. Real property is something that is not readily movable. Land, buildings, improvements, anything that's residential, industrial, if you can't move it, it is real property. Movable property is intangible property, which is stocks and bonds. These are taxed as well, but in this state, we actually have many incentives for schools to invest in stocks and bonds. Once again, why for your smaller school districts, I would strongly encourage a smaller school district to hire somebody with a background in finance for investment, because we shelter more for intangible property in the state of Oklahoma. We're going to talk about that a lot later in the course. So historically, we've said this already, property tax at the local level is the most reliable source of income for school districts. It's good. It really is, because it forces people to invest in the district. That is a positive. It can be increased and decreased as needed, and you can take it on as you take it on. So what are the desirable traits of property taxes? What make them good and what make them something that you would actually want to use? It should be easily collected. It should be regulated and controlled. Big and important is that it has to be impossible to avoid paying. I like the fact that we are a visible state with property taxes. You can look up online basically what people should be paying for property taxes. Property assessments are posted to the public in this state. Some states that's not the case. We post them here. That's good. There's an accountability factor that's involved in it. That's a desirable trait. So when we assess a property has to be assessed at its true value. How do you determine true value of a property? What makes up true value of a property?
Where it's
Desirability, yeah.
Okay, so we have location / desirability. What else?
Condition.
Condition. What else? Acreage. Number of,
The buildings on the property, is that?
well, you could do buildings on the property, or even rooms, but if we're looking at homes, number of bedrooms,
Yeah. The
size,
square footage.
square footage of the house,
What year it was built?
year, school district.
Yeah,
But that's true value of what a home is and what it should be. Do we always assess with that? Why not?
Usually, I mean, a lot of times it's the comps around the house, like what the
Yeah.
other house has sold for recently
Yeah.
around that house.
And why do we use that practice?
It's more accurate.
Well,
I mean, as far as what things are selling for.
It's more accurate in terms of what things are selling for, but how do you know your next door neighbor didn't run a crack den and
Right.
completely got the house and somehow it sold? But it's easier. It's much easier to assess property based on comparatives. You wish that they couldn't, but to actually have people come in and assess every property would be a massive struggle. But in theory, you should assess based on the true value. But we use comparatives, and we use them in every state. Oklahoma is going to continue to be a problem. Why? Because we keep building more houses.
I was gonna say more apartments.
I was gonna
Well, yeah,
say-
but yeah, I mean, but still, I mean, even still, we're building more apartments, we're building more. So the more that you build and the more there is to assess, the less accurate your assessments become. That's a big idea. So for Massachusetts, can they do a full property assessment anytime they want to? How much new property is getting built in Massachusetts?
Not much.
None. Like, we're looking at like maybe less than 1% of the space is actually used. How much space is used in Oklahoma?
Oh, there's a lot left.
There's a lot left. There's a lot left here. There's a lot left in Texas. So we're not going to get true values because of it. What can you do to avoid increased taxation? If you keep investing in personal property consistently over time, meaning you keep doing renovations and improvements and you consistently do it, you avoid taxes in this state. It's the smartest thing that you can do. If you were doing a capital repair on your homes or a massive renovation, I would space it out over 5 to 10 years. You will avoid paying property taxes than trying to do it over in once. But if you want to pay more taxes, you do it all at one time. Anytime you go into urban and low-income centers, then they suffer the most when people are slowly increasing their property taxes in the rich areas because somebody has to pay for the urban and low-income centers. So the question then becomes who pays for it, which is once again why I like this state and the fact that we split the burden on the state and on the local properties.
In big cities, how does it work when you have, like New York City, and you have apartment buildings, and you have apartments that are inside those buildings that somehow get locked into a certain rent for a long period of time, and then the others around, other apartments aren't? I mean, how does that happen?
Honestly, everybody else suffers. That's been a massive issue in New York City forever. Some people have grandfathered in clauses on rent that says they have to pay the rent or they're allowed the apartment until they die. And that's one of the things they agreed to it because at the time they're paying slightly above market value, knowing that 20 years from now it's going to be a lot less than what market value is. So basically you're playing a game of screw your neighbor. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to live for 30 years, but my next door neighbor who's going to move in here 10 years from now, we're going to charge them 20% more because the property's naturally going to go up and go up in value because of it, and the apartment tax is going to go up as well. So in my opinion, when you do that, everybody suffers because this person is locked in and they're paying slightly more than market value, but because they're doing it, that gets money and it gets revenue that you can use